Haunted Fears here with 3 Home Alone horror stories that will have you questioning every shadow in your house tonight. Imagine swinging open your garage door to discover a hidden nest, mattresses stained with use, empty food cans scattered around, and walls plastered with photos. Not just any photos. Close-ups of you at your desk, eating dinner alone, sleeping soundly in your bed, captured from inches away. You've been watched. Intimately. That's story 3, but what made this intruder choose that exact spot? Story 2 builds the dread even higher. A woman bolts awake to heavy dragging sounds rumbling across her attic floorboards, night after night. She grabs a flashlight, climbs the ladder with her heart pounding, only to find the thick dust blanket untouched. No footprints, no tracks. Whatever's up there moves without leaving a trace. How long has it been listening to her? And story 1. A doorbell camera catches the same dark figure lurking outside, motionless the first. Night, edging closer the second, pressing against the glass by the third. It's coming for the door. Timestamps below, but don't skip. These horrors link in ways that'll chill you deeper. Before we start, check your locks. Now, new to the channel, smash subscribe, join the Haunted Fears horror family, turn on notifications, comment which story hit too close, like if you're already looking behind you. Haunted Fears. Story 1 begins now. My name is Melissa Crawford, and I heard something in my attic that made me abandon a house I'd just signed a year-long lease for. What started as a faint creak turned into something I still can't explain. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. I moved into that old Victorian in early November, right after my breakup. I needed space, distance, a fresh start, all the cliches. The house was perfect on paper. 2 stories, hardwood floors, those tall windows with the original wavy glass, tucked away on a quiet street in a small New England town where everyone knew everyone. The rent was almost too good to be true. But the landlord explained the place had been sitting empty for a few months. He said the previous tenant left suddenly for work reasons. I didn't think much of it. I was just relieved to find something affordable that wasn't a cramped apartment. The first week was fine. I spent my days unpacking boxes and my nights working on freelance design projects in the living room, my laptop glowing in the dim light while rain drummed against those old windows. The house made noise, sure, but that's what old houses do. Pipes clanging, floorboards settling, the wind rattling the shutters. I actually found it comforting in a weird way. It felt lived in, like the house had a personality. The footsteps started on a Tuesday night around 9:30. I was deep into a logo redesign, headphones half on when I heard it. A slow, deliberate creak directly above my head. Then another, and another. Someone was walking across my attic floor, pacing back and forth in a steady rhythm. Step, pause, step, pause. My first thought was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a squirrel that had gotten in through a vent. But the steps were too measured, too heavy. They sounded human. I pulled off my headphones and sat perfectly still, listening. The footsteps continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I waited, holding my breath, but there was nothing. Just the rain and the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I tried to go back to work, but my focus was shot. Every few minutes, I'd glance up at the ceiling, half expecting to hear it again. 20 minutes later, it started up again. The same slow pacing, the same deliberate rhythm. This time I heard something else too. A dragging sound, like someone pulling a heavy piece of furniture across the floor. The ceiling above me actually creaked under the weight. Fine dust drifted down and caught in the lamplight, swirling like tiny ghosts. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, then headed upstairs to the second floor. The attic access was a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. I'd only been up there once, when I first toured the place. It was just a raw space with exposed rafters and old insulation, nothing stored up there except dust and darkness. I yanked the cord, and the ladder unfolded with a groan. Cold air washed down over me. Carrying that musty smell of old wood and stagnant air, I climbed up slowly, shining my phone light into every corner. Nothing. The attic was exactly as I remembered it. Empty, undisturbed, thick dust coating every surface. I swept my light across the floorboards looking for footprints or drag marks, anything that would explain what I'd heard. The dust was uniform, untouched except for my own footprints from the previous visit, already fading. No animals, no signs of entry, no logical explanation. I went back downstairs, feeling stupid and paranoid. Old house, new sounds, overactive imagination. I made myself tea and returned to my laptop, determined to finish the project. But I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. I kept the volume low on my headphones, one ear always listening. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same pattern. Footsteps pacing overhead, slow and methodical, followed by that dragging sound. This time, I didn't hesitate. I went straight upstairs and pulled down the attic ladder. Again, nothing. Empty. Space, undisturbed dust, cold, stale air. But when I came back down and settled into my work, the sound started up again within minutes. It was like whatever was up there was waiting for me to leave. By the fourth night, I was exhausted and on edge. I'd barely slept, jumping at every normal house sound, constantly looking up at the ceiling. I tried working with music playing loudly, hoping to drown out any noise from above. But around 10 o'clock, I heard it anyway. The footsteps were louder this time, more aggressive, pacing faster. The dragging sound was heavier, more pronounced. And then something new happened. 3 sharp knocks, like someone rapping their knuckles against the floorboards directly above my head. My hands froze on the keyboard. The knocks came again, 3 deliberate raps that seemed to echo through the whole house. I felt my heart hammering in my throat. This wasn't pipes or settling wood. This was targeted, intentional. I wanted to run, to grab my keys, and leave. But instead, I found myself walking upstairs again, pulled by some need to understand, to find a rational explanation. I climbed into the attic one more time, my phone light shaking slightly in my hand. The cold hit me harder this time, like stepping into a freezer. My breath came out in visible puffs. I swept the light slowly across the space, and that's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the far corner, near the eaves, there was a spot where the dust looked different. Not disturbed exactly, but thinner, like something had been moved there recently and then carefully repositioned. I walked over, my footsteps creaking loudly in the silence. It was an old box, cardboard softened with age, sitting against the wall. I hadn't noticed it before because it blended into the shadows. I knelt down and opened it, finding stacks of papers inside, old bills, lease agreements, maintenance records. I flipped through them quickly, my phone light casting jumping shadows. Most were yellowed and dated, going back decades. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. Complaint forms. Multiple complaint forms from previous tenants, spanning different years. Same complaint, over and over. Sounds from the attic. Footsteps, dragging, knocking. One form from 15 years ago included a handwritten note in the margin. Hired inspector, found nothing. Recommended tenant break lease. Another from 8 years ago. Third family to leave within 6 months. Property becoming difficult to rent. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. The landlord had lied. This wasn't about work reasons. People had been leaving because of what I was hearing, and clearly no one had ever figured out what was causing it. I heard it then, while I was kneeling in the attic with those papers in my hands. Footsteps, but this time they weren't above me. They were behind me on the attic floor, slow and deliberate. I spun around, my phone light cutting through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty space and exposed rafters. But I could hear them, clear as anything, moving from the far wall toward where I was crouched. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. I didn't wait to see more. I scrambled backward, dropped the papers, and practically fell down the attic ladder. I shoved it back up so hard it slammed into place. Then I ran downstairs, grabbed my laptop and my purse, and walked straight out the front door into the cold November night. I didn't even lock it behind me. I spent that night at a motel, and the next day I called the landlord. I told him I was breaking the lease, that I'd found the complaint forms, that I knew he'd been lying. He tried to talk me down, offered to reduce the rent, said he'd have someone come investigate. I refused. Whatever was in that attic, whatever was pacing those floors and dragging things in the darkness, I wanted no part of it. I never went back except to get my things, and I brought 2 people with me when I did. We were in and out in under an hour. The whole time, I never looked up at the ceiling. I didn't want to know if it was still there, still pacing, still waiting. I'm in a different place now, a modern apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors. Sometimes I miss those tall windows and hardwood floors, the charm of that old Victorian. But then I remember the sound of those footsteps in the darkness, the cold air washing down from the attic, those complaint forms documenting decades of terror. And I'm grateful I got out when I did, before whatever was up there decided to do more than just pace. My name is Derek Lawson, and I installed a smart doorbell camera to feel safer. Instead, it showed me something that made me realize I was being watched in ways I couldn't begin to understand. I'm an IT consultant, 27, living alone in a high-rise condo on the 18th floor in downtown Chicago. My whole place is wired, smart locks, automated lights, voice-controlled everything. I know it sounds excessive, but when you work in tech, you either embrace it or you're a hypocrite. The doorbell camera was the last addition, installed on a Tuesday afternoon in late February. The hallway outside my unit is shared by only 3 other condos, and we barely cross paths. I liked it that way. Anonymous city living suited me fine. The first alert came that same night around 11. I was at my desk, 3 monitors glowing in the dark, working on a client's network security audit. My phone buzzed on the charging pad. Motion detected. I glanced at the notification, swiped it open, and saw the live feed. The hallway was empty, just the usual sterile lighting and bland beige carpet. Probably someone walking past to the elevator. I dismissed it and went back to work. 20 minutes later, another alert. I picked up my phone, already annoyed. This time, the footage showed a figure standing directly in front of my door. They were positioned at an odd angle, head tilted down and to the side so the camera couldn't catch their face. Just a dark jacket, hands in pockets, completely still. The timestamp said they'd been standing there for 42 seconds. I watched the live feed expecting them to knock or move, but they just stood there. Then, after another 10 seconds, they walked away, out of frame toward the elevator. I felt a prickle of unease but pushed it down. Probably a neighbor, maybe drunk, wrong door. It happens. I made a mental note to check with building security in the morning and went back to my audit report. The third alert came at 11:37. Same thing. Figure in front of my door, face hidden, standing motionless. This time they stayed for 2 full minutes. I pulled up the app and watched in real time. The feed was grainy in night vision mode, casting everything in shades of green and gray. The figure didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't even seem to breathe. Just stood there, like a statue. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't random. I got up and walked to my door, keeping my footsteps quiet. I have a peephole, old school backup, and I looked through it. The hallway was empty. I pulled up the app again. The feed showed nothing now, just the empty corridor. But according to the motion log, the person had been there 15 seconds ago. I checked the timestamps. They'd left exactly when I approached the door. I triple-checked my smart lock. Engaged. I turned on the hallway camera's 2-way audio and spoke into my phone. "Can I help you with something?" My voice echoed tinnily through the speaker mounted above my doorbell. No response. Just the hum of the building's ventilation and distant traffic noise from the street below. I went back to my desk, but couldn't focus. I kept the doorbell app open on my phone, volume up, waiting. The blue glow from my monitors felt oppressive now instead of comfortable. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the feed. Empty hallway. Normal. Safe. The fourth alert came at 12:15. I grabbed my phone immediately. The figure was back. Same position, same angle, hiding their face. But this time they were closer to the camera. Close enough that I could see the texture of their jacket. Some kind of dark windbreaker. They stayed for 90 seconds, then left. I opened my laptop and pulled up the saved clips from the past hour. I watched them in sequence, and that's when I noticed the pattern. Each time they came back, they stood a little closer to the lens. The first visit, they were maybe 3 feet from the door. The second, 2.5 feet. The third, 2 feet. This fourth, 1. They were close enough that their jacket filled half the frame. My hands were shaking slightly as I called building security. A bored voice answered. Some overnight guard I'd never met. I explained the situation, tried not to sound paranoid, said someone was loitering outside my unit. He said he'd send someone up to check. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. The guard. They'd walked the entire 18th floor. No one there. All the hallways were empty. He suggested maybe my camera was glitching, picking up shadows or reflections. I thanked him and hung up, feeling stupid and paranoid. But I knew what I'd seen. That wasn't a glitch. I made coffee, knowing I wouldn't sleep anyway, and settled back at my desk. I started going through my daily routine in my head, trying to figure out if I'd noticed anyone following me, watching me. Nothing stood out. I work from home 3 days a week, go to the office the other 2. I order groceries online. I don't have a regular schedule that someone could track easily, except my blood went cold. Except online. I'm always online. My calendar is synced across devices. My location services are always on. My social media, though private, still shows when I'm active. If someone knew how to look, if they had access to any of my accounts or devices, they could track my patterns perfectly. The 5th alert came at 1:33. I was ready this time. I opened the feed and felt my stomach drop. The figure was directly in front of the camera now, so close that their chest filled the entire frame. I couldn't see their face, just the fabric of their jacket. They stood there for 3 minutes. At one point, the feed stuttered, pixelated, then cleared. Like someone was interfering with the signal. I pulled up my network monitor, checking for unusual devices connected to my Wi-Fi. Nothing. But that glitch felt wrong, deliberate. I watched the figure on my screen, and even though I couldn't see their eyes, I had the overwhelming sensation that they were looking directly into the camera. Looking at me. When they finally moved, they didn't walk away toward the elevator like before. They stepped back slowly, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of something in their hand. A phone. Raised up, pointed at my door. They were recording. Recording my door, my camera. Maybe recording me through the peephole. I called building security again. Different guard this time, more alert. I explained everything in detail. The multiple visits, the escalating proximity, the pattern. He said he'd call the police and meet them in the lobby. He told me to stay inside with the door locked, as if I needed to be told. I paced my apartment, phone gripped in my hand, watching the live feed. The hallway stayed empty. 20 minutes later, the guard called back. Police were there. They'd searched the entire floor, checked the stairwells, reviewed the building's main security footage. Nothing. No one matching the description had entered or left the 18th floor. The building's cameras showed my hallway completely empty during the times I'd reported someone standing there. "That's impossible," I said. "I have the footage." I sent them 3 of the clips. The guard put me on hold. When he came back, his voice had changed. Confused. He said their system showed no one in my hallway at those times. He asked if maybe my doorbell camera was malfunctioning, capturing footage from a different time or something. I hung up. I went through every clip again, examining them frame by frame. They were real. Timestamps matched, Metadata was consistent. This wasn't a glitch or a recording from another day. Someone had been there. But if the building's cameras didn't show them, that meant they either knew how to avoid the main cameras or they'd hacked the system. Given my line of work, neither option was comforting. The rest of the night was silent. No more alerts. I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk monitoring my network, my doorbell feed, every connected device I owned. Nothing unusual. As dawn broke and gray winter light filtered through my windows, I felt exhausted and ridiculous. Maybe I was losing it. Stress, overwork, too much screen time. I finally crashed around 7 a.m., face down on my couch, phone still clutched in my hand. When I woke up 3 hours later, I had 12 missed notifications. My heart hammered as I opened the app. But they were all system notifications. Low battery warning for the doorbell camera. Firmware update available. Routine stuff. Except there was one more clip. Auto-save to the cloud at 6:42 a.m. I must have been asleep. I opened it with shaking hands. The figure was there again. But this time, they weren't hiding their face. They were facing the camera directly, and they'd moved close enough that the lens distorted their features slightly, making them hard to identify. But I could see enough. Dark eyes, no expression, and in their raised hand, clearly visible, a phone pointed at my door. The timestamp showed they'd stood there for 6 minutes. 6 minutes while I slept 15 feet away. Then, in the final seconds of the clip, they did something that made my blood freeze. They lifted their other hand and pressed one finger against their lips. A shushing gesture, the universal sign for silence. The clip ended. I grabbed my laptop and started going through my security logs, my account activity, everything. That's when I found it. I log in to my personal cloud storage from an IP address I didn't recognize. They'd accessed my doorbell footage. They'd been watching the same clips I'd been watching, seeing exactly when I checked, when I called security, when I reviewed the recordings. They weren't just standing outside my door. They were inside my digital life, watching me watch them. I filed a police report that included everything: the footage, the unauthorized access, the timestamps. The officer who took my statement was professional, but skeptical. Without clear images or building camera corroboration, there wasn't much they could do. They'd increase patrols in the area. They suggested I change all my passwords and consider staying somewhere else for a few days. I did both. I'm at an extended stay hotel now, 4th night here. I've changed every password, enabled 2-factor authentication on everything, even wiped and reset my devices. The doorbell camera is disconnected. I've been checking my cloud storage obsessively, and there haven't been any more unauthorized logins. But 2 days ago, I got a notification that someone viewed one of my old doorbell clips, the same final clip, the one with the shushing gesture. It was accessed from a new IP address, somewhere in the city. I didn't click on it. I just archived everything and locked down my account even tighter. I don't know if I'll go back to that condo. My lease is up in 4 months. Part of me wants to run, move to a different building, a different neighborhood, start completely over. But another part of me knows that won't help. Whoever this is, they didn't just find my door. They found me online first. And if they did it once, they can do it again. I still have that last clip saved on an encrypted drive. Sometimes late at night, I think about opening it, studying that face again, looking for anything I missed. But I never do. Because I'm afraid that if I watch it one more time, I'll see something new, something worse. And I'm terrified that the next notification I get won't be from my old doorbell camera. It'll be from wherever I am now, because maybe they already know. My name is Trevor Blackwood, and I thought house-sitting a friend's empty place would be easy money between photography gigs. What I found living in their garage crawlspace made me swear off ever stepping foot in someone else's house again. I'm 33, a freelance photographer who practically lives out of a backpack. Weddings in Jackson Hole, corporate shoots in Denver, roadside motels that smell like bleach and cheap cologne, I've slept in my car on mountain passes and in sketchy hostels overseas. I like to think I'm not easily rattled. So when a college buddy offered me 3 weeks in his new Colorado suburban house while he and his wife went to Europe, it sounded perfect. 3-car garage, finished basement that he called the media cave. All utilities covered, plus a decent chunk of cash for keeping an eye on the place. The house was exactly what realtors love to brag about. Quiet cul-de-sac, trimmed lawns, maple trees just starting to turn orange in late October. Inside, open-plan kitchen with quartz counters, stainless appliances, big leather sectional facing a wall-mounted TV. The basement had a huge desk, dual monitors, blackout shades, perfect for editing my backlog of wedding photos. The only space that didn't fit the catalog-perfect vibe was the garage. That was chaos. 3 bays, concrete floor stained with oil and tire marks. Boxes stacked from floor to ceiling along one side, labeled things like kitchen, books, misc, Ixmas. Old furniture covered with sheets. 2 bikes hanging from hooks, ladders, plastic totes. It looked like they'd moved in fast and then run out of organizing energy. On my first night, I did a quick walkthrough like I always do. Front door, check the locks. Patio slider, check. Windows, check. Interior door from the kitchen to the garage. Heavy, solid, deadbolt and knob lock. I flipped the deadbolt, tried the handle. Secure. I didn't love how cramped the garage felt, but it was separated from the main house by that door, so I put it out of my mind. The first 2 days were normal. I made coffee, edited photos in the basement office, watched movies at night, ate microwave dinners, texted my friend updates like, house still standing, plants alive. Nothing felt off. The third night, around 8 in the evening, I was in the basement, headphones on, zoomed in on a bride's face, fixing the yellow cast from a tungsten reception light. My music was low enough that I could still hear the house, a habit from years of staying in unfamiliar places. That's when I heard it. Metal on metal, a sharp, hollow clang that echoed faintly through the floor. I paused the music, listened. For a moment, nothing. Then it came again. Clang, a few seconds of silence. Clang. Not a one-time thump, not pipes knocking, but a rhythmic, deliberate sound, like someone lightly bumping 2 tools together. The basement in this house was mostly under the living room, but part of it extended beneath the kitchen and garage area. The sound was coming from overhead and slightly to the side, exactly where I figured the garage was. I told myself it was probably something stupid. Maybe a wrench had been left balancing on the edge of a shelf and was slowly slipping, or a loose hook tapping against metal. I tried to focus on my work, but the clanging continued. Slow, steady, like a metronome with a steel tongue. After the 6th or 7th hit, my annoyance overrode my attempt to ignore it. I pulled off my headphones, stood up, and grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight. I wasn't scared, not really, just irritated. Upstairs, the house felt warmer than the basement. I walked past the dark living room to the kitchen. The interior door to the garage was on the far wall, next to a small mudroom bench. I rounded the corner and stopped. The door was open. Not wide, just a few inches. Enough to see a sliver of darkness beyond the frame, enough for cold air to seep through. I stared at the deadbolt. It was still in the locked position, but the knob below it was turned just enough that the latch wasn't fully engaged. I knew I had closed it. I was sure I had heard it click, but the door was unmistakably unlatched. The clanging had stopped. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the hair rise on my arms. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Maybe I hadn't pulled the door shut all the way. Maybe closing it had felt like locking it. Still, I put my hand on the knob and slowly pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the familiar scents of a garage. Motor oil, dust, cardboard, faint rubber from stacked tires. My phone's flashlight carved a narrow beam into the darkness. The overhead lights were off. Outside, the last light of evening was fading. The small windows near the garage ceiling threw in faint gray rectangles. "Hello?" I called. The sound bounced off the concrete floor and unfinished walls. No answer, no movement. I stepped. Inside. The temperature drop was immediate, seeping through my socks into my feet. My breath fogged just slightly when I exhaled. I swung the light across the room. The workbench was lined with tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers hanging from a pegboard. Shelves held plastic bins, paint cans, random house stuff. My friend's SUV was gone, obviously, but my rental car sat in the middle bay. Nothing looked out of place. No tools swinging, no pipes hitting anything, no obvious source of the sound. Still, I walked toward the back wall. The boxes were stacked high there, forming a lumpy wall of cardboard and plastic. Moving blankets draped over some of them like heavy sagging curtains. I pushed at the nearest stack. It didn't budge. Rock solid. Probably some metal shifting with the temperature, I muttered to myself. I backed out, shut the door firmly, and this time I triple-checked the lock. Knob turned. Deadbolt turned. Pulled to confirm resistance. Satisfied, I went back. Downstairs. The rest of the night was quiet. On the fourth night, it returned. Same time, somewhere around 8. I was halfway through adjusting color balance on a series of reception shots when I heard the clang. Then another. Then another. My body went cold before I even took my headphones off. I knew exactly what it was now. The sound of metal on metal, with just enough hollow echo to suggest a large, mostly empty space. The garage. I didn't rush upstairs this time. I moved more slowly, phone in hand, heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. In the kitchen, I found the door again. It was open. This time wider. Maybe 6 inches. Enough that the darkness behind it seemed to swallow the light from the kitchen. I hadn't even gone near it since the night before. The clanging stopped the moment I stepped into the mudroom area, like someone had heard me coming. I swallowed, hand tightening on my phone. I considered calling my friend, then felt stupid. What would I say? Hey, your garage is making noises and your door is slightly open. He was in another time zone, on vacation. There wasn't anything he could do. I turned the kitchen light off, leaving only the screen glow and flashlight beam. It made it easier to see into the garage. This time, instead of just stepping in, I stood at the threshold and reached over to flip on the garage lights. Fluorescent tubes flickered, then came to life with a low buzz. Harsh white light flooded the space, washing away shadows. Everything snapped into focus. Tools on the walls, tires in stacks, boxes towering along one side, the concrete floor speckled with stains, small debris, and something new. Near the back wall, between the boxes and the far corner, I saw a dark patch on the floor that didn't match the rest. A rectangle, slightly raised, almost like a roll of something. I stepped inside, now with full visibility, and walked towards it. As I got closer, the shape resolved into fabric. A sleeping bag, blue, dirty, flattened in the middle where someone's weight had been. Beside it, arranged in a sloppy cluster, were 3 empty fast food bags, several crumpled paper wrappers, and 2 crushed energy drink cans. A plastic bottle lay on its side, a streak of dried yellow liquid stuck to the bottom. It didn't look like the kind of mess a homeowner leaves behind when moving. It looked recent, lived in. My mouth went dry. I crouched down, careful not to touch anything, and looked closer. The food bags had logos from a place I'd passed on the way into the neighborhood. The receipt sticking out of one of them showed a date from 5 days ago. I stood up so fast my vision blurred for a second. Someone had been staying here, not in the main house, but here, in the garage, while I was sleeping upstairs, while I was editing in the basement, while I walked past the interior door, thinking of it as a border between safe, inside and outside, not my problem. I turned in a slow circle. That's when I saw the gap. Between 2 of the biggest stacks of boxes, where moving cartons met a column of old furniture covered in plastic, there was a narrow space, maybe 18 inches wide. The kind of gap you don't notice unless you're looking for it, but big enough for a person to slip through sideways. The cold air seemed thicker there, like it was coming from deeper than the rest of the garage. My phone light barely penetrated the space. I took one step toward it, then stopped. Every instinct I had from years of shooting in sketchy places, the same instincts that kept me from following certain alleys at night, was screaming at me not to go in there. Not alone. Not with nothing but a phone in my hand. I backed away instead. The hair on my arms was standing up. I turned the garage lights back off, stepped into the house, and locked the door. Really locked it. Deadbolt and knob, and then leaning my weight to feel the seals compress. Then I called the police. When they arrived, I tried to sound matter-of-fact. There are signs someone has been living in the garage, I told them. There's a sleeping bag and recent trash. I heard noises on multiple nights. The interior door has been opening somehow. 2 officers came in, both middle-aged, both carrying that particular mix of weariness and readiness you see in people who've been doing this a long time. They followed me to the garage door. One stayed with me in the kitchen, while the other checked the door and the locks. "You didn't touch anything out there?" the one next to me asked. "Just looked," I said. "I didn't move anything." He nodded, then joined his partner. They went into the garage together, their own flashlights cutting across the light from the overheads. I watched from the kitchen, not stepping over the threshold, feeling strangely like I'd crossed some invisible line just by seeing what I'd seen. I heard them talking quietly, the occasional scrape of a boot on concrete. Then one of them called out, "You're going to want to see this." I didn't move. The other officer came back for me. "Stay at the door," he said. "Don't step closer than that." They led my gaze toward the gap I'd seen between the boxes. One of them had dragged a filing cabinet out of the way, revealing not just a narrow space, but a rough opening in the drywall behind it. A section of wall cut away and then hinged back into place like a door, now hanging slightly ajar. Behind it was a small space, maybe 4 feet high, 6 feet deep. Bare concrete floor, low ceiling, a crawl-like room that shouldn't have been there. Inside, the beam of the flashlight illuminated more than just the sleeping bag and trash. There was a small battery-powered lantern, still on its lowest setting. A blanket bunched in the corner. A plastic storage crate turned on its side as a makeshift table. And on that makeshift table, a neat stack of photographs. My photographs. Not ones I'd taken. Photographs of me. The officer closest to the crawlspace put on gloves, reached carefully, and lifted the top print to show me. It was a 4R6, slightly grainy but clear enough. It showed the basement window from outside, at night. Through the glass at my desk was me. Head down, staring at my screen, headphones on. The timestamp printed in small digital font at the bottom showed 8 minutes past 10. The first night I'd stayed in the house. Another photo showed the kitchen from the outside deck. Me standing at the stove, stirring a pan. Light from the overhead fixtures cast harsh shadows across my face. Another shot caught me coming in the front door with groceries. My face turned half toward the camera as I nudged the door shut with my hip. These weren't casual snaps. They were composed. Someone had used a decent camera, maybe even a long lens, to take them from a distance. They'd watched where I spent my time and documented it. My stomach lurched. I had photographed thousands of people in my career. Couples, families, executives. But I had never once thought about how those same tools could be used on me while I lived my life, unguarded, in what I thought was a safe, private space. The officer holding the photo gave me a quick look, gauging my reaction. "You know this guy?" he asked. "That's me," I said. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears, too flat. They collected more evidence. Footprints in the dust, larger than mine. Food wrappers. An empty pill bottle with a partially scratched-off label. A rough floor plan of the house drawn in a notebook, with certain rooms circled. The basement office. The kitchen. The master bedroom upstairs. They checked the exterior next. On the side of the house, half hidden behind a trash bin and some yard tools, was a side door to the garage. From the outside, it looked intact. From the inside, one of the lower panels had been pried loose just enough for someone to reach in and manipulate the latch. It was a quiet entry point, away from the front door and the street. It's not uncommon, one of the officers told me later, when we were sitting in the living room and they were filling out a report. People slip into garages, crawl spaces, sometimes attics. They stay in houses while folks are at work or at night. Use the power, the water. Take just enough food not to get noticed. How long do you think he was here? I asked. At least a couple of weeks, he said. Maybe longer. Hard to know until we dig into it. I spent that night in a hotel. My friend caught an earlier flight home. I left him a voicemail explaining what had happened, then texted the short version. Someone was living in your garage. The police found a hidden space and photos of me inside. I'm out. He tried to apologize when he got back, offered me extra money, promised to upgrade his security, offered to pay for therapy if I needed it. I told him it wasn't his fault, but I also told him I wouldn't be coming back to watch the house again. Ever. The weird thing is, the longer I've sat with it, the more the fear has shifted. It's not just about the fact that someone was there. It's about how close they were. We measure distance in yards, in feet, in miles. After that house, I started measuring in walls, below, behind, above. The crawl space was maybe 15 feet from the chair where I sat editing, with only concrete and drywall between us. The intruder knew my rhythms. When I cooked, when I slept, when I was most focused on my screen. I still travel for work. I still stay in other people's spaces, Airbnbs, rentals, the occasional friend's couch, but I look at them differently now. I check not just the locks, but the gaps, the access panels, the vents. I look at garages and wonder if anyone's claimed a corner. I examine basements for places where the wall doesn't quite line up. Empty houses don't feel empty anymore. They feel like sets where I can't see all the cameras. If you felt even a fraction of what Trevor went through, remember this. Not every horror needs ghosts or demons. Sometimes it's just another person, a few feet away, learning your habits in the dark. If stories like this make you glance at your doors, your garage, or that one room you never really check, then this is your kind of nightmare. For more true-feeling, Home Alone horror stories like this, subscribe to Haunted Fears. Hit like if this made you uneasy, and drop a comment sharing whether you would still house sit after this. Turn on notifications, because the next story might sound a little too much like your own life.
This story, including the research script and editing, was completely created by me. Thank you for supporting original content.